The great hall of the Zephyrian Empire buzzed with angry voices. Admiral Kethvar stood at the center of the massive chamber, his forearms spread wide as he addressed the War Council. His blue-scaled skin shimmered under the bright lights, and his yellow eyes glowed with fury. "These humans dare to refuse us?" he roared, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. "These tiny, weak creatures think they can stand against the might of our empire?" The other council members nodded their agreement. General Vexitar, whose scarred face showed the marks of 100 battles, stepped forward. "My lord, our scouts report that humans are small and soft. They have no natural weapons, no thick skin, no claws. They are like children compared to us." Admiral Kethvar laughed, a harsh sound that made the younger officers step back. "Children? No, General. They are even smaller than that. They are like fleas, tiny jumping insects that hop from world to world, thinking they matter." The War Council looked at the holographic display floating above them. It showed the Kepler 442b system, where rich veins of precious metals waited to be mined. The Zephyrians had claimed this world by right of conquest, as they had claimed hundreds of others over the centuries, but the humans had arrived first and refused to leave. "Show me their response again," the Admiral commanded. A technician activated the recording. A human female appeared on the screen. She looked impossibly small and fragile to the Zephyrian eyes. Her skin was pale pink, her hair was the color of old leaves, and she wore simple clothes instead of battle armor. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiance," the human said. Her voice was calm and steady. "We have received your demand to leave Kepler 442b. Our answer is no. This world was unoccupied when we arrived. We have established mining operations here legally. If you wish to challenge our claim, we accept your challenge. Prepare for battle." The recording ended, and the War Council burst into laughter. The sound filled the great hall like thunder. "Prepare for battle?" General Vextar wheezed between laughs. "What battle? We have 300 dreadnoughts. Each one of our ships is the size of their largest city. Our plasma cannons can crack moons in half." Admiral Kethvar brought up another display. It showed the human fleet gathered near Kepler 442b. The ships looked like toys compared to the Zephyrian vessels. The largest human ship was smaller than a Zephyrian fighter craft. "Our intelligence reports that they have maybe 50 small ships," the Admiral said. "Frigates, they call them, and a few experimental vessels that our spies could not identify. But even if those mystery ships were 10 times larger than they appear, they would still be no match for us." Commander Yithal, the youngest member of the council, raised one of her 4 hands. "My lord, what if this is a trap? What if they have hidden forces we cannot see?" The Admiral's yellow eyes fixed on her, and she shrank back. "Commander, you forget who we are. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered worlds before these humans even learned to make fire. We have faced enemies with stealth technology, with hidden fleets with weapons we had never seen before. And we have crushed them all." He gestured to the walls of the Great Hall, which were covered with trophies from defeated enemies. Weapons, armor, and flags from 100 different species hung there like monuments to Zephyrian power. "The key to victory is overwhelming force," the Admiral continued. "When you face an enemy, you do not give them time to think or plan or hope. You strike with such power that they surrender before the first shot is fired. This is the Zephyrian way." General Vextar stepped forward again. "What are your orders, my lord?" Admiral Kethvar turned to the holographic display and began moving ship markers with his hands. "We will divide our fleet into 3 groups. The first group, 100 ships under my direct command, will approach from the day side of the planet. The second group, 100 ships under General Vextar, will come from the night side. The third group, 100 ships under Commander Zalex, will position themselves above the planet's north pole." The other officers watched as the Admiral arranged the markers around the small human fleet. "The humans will be trapped," he explained. "No matter which direction they try to run, they will face 100 dreadnoughts. Our plasma cannons will fire together, and their entire fleet will be destroyed in the first volley. The battle will be over in minutes." Commander Yithal looked at the display. "My lord, should we offer them a chance to surrender first?" Admiral Kethvar laughed again. "Why would we do that? They had their chance to surrender when we first contacted them. Instead, they chose to challenge us. Now they will learn what happens when fleas try to bite giants. He turned to address the entire council. Send word to all ship captains. We leave in 3 days. Every vessel is to be at full combat readiness. Weapons charged, shields raised, crew at battle stations. I want these human fleas to see our full might as we approach. I want them to understand how hopeless their situation is. The council members began to leave, but General Vextar remained behind. My lord, there is one more thing. Our intelligence suggests that humans are different from other species we have faced. Different how? They do not seem to follow normal patterns. Most species, when faced with overwhelming odds, either surrender or fight desperately in one final battle. But human history shows they sometimes do unexpected things. Admiral Kethavar waved one of his hands dismissively. General, you worry too much. Different tactics cannot overcome the simple mathematics of war. We have 300 massive ships with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. They have 50 tiny ships with primitive weapons. No amount of being different can change those numbers. But as the Great Hall emptied and the Admiral stood alone before the holographic display, he found himself staring at the small cluster of human ships. They looked so insignificant, like insects gathered around a light. Yet something about the way they were positioned troubled him in a way he could not name. He shook his head and dismissed the feeling. In 3 days, those tiny ships would be nothing but expanding clouds of gas and metal. The human flea would be crushed, and another world would belong to the Zephyrian Empire. Far away, in the darkness between stars, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance. She had been listening to intercepted Zephyrian communications for hours. Her crew worked quietly around her, preparing for what they all knew would be the most important battle in human history. Captain, her communications officer called out, we're receiving the Admiral's broadcast to his fleet. He's calling us human fleas again. Captain Chen smiled, but there was no humor in it. Human fleas, she repeated softly. You know what, Lieutenant? I think I like that name. Fleas are small, but they're persistent, and they always find a way to make the big animals very, very uncomfortable. She turned to her tactical officer. How long until the Zephyrian fleet arrives? 3 days, Captain. Good. That gives us time to show them exactly what human fleas can do. Admiral Kethvar stood in the command center of his flagship, the Dominator. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of all 300 Zephyrian ships as they moved through space toward the human fleet. Everything was going exactly according to plan. Report, he commanded. All ships in position, my lord, came the reply from his tactical officer. First group maintaining formation on the dayside approach. Second group moving into position on the night side. Third group taking position above the North Pole. The human fleet is completely surrounded. The Admiral nodded with satisfaction. This was how real warfare was conducted. Not with tricks or clever tactics, but with overwhelming force applied. In the right places at the right time. The Zephyrians had used this same strategy to conquer dozens of worlds, and it had never failed. He looked at the tactical display showing the human ships. They were still gathered around Kepler 442b, apparently making no attempt to flee or reposition. Strange, he muttered. Most species at least try to run when they see our fleet approaching. General Vextar, commanding the second group from his ship the Destroyer, sent a communication. My lord, the humans are behaving oddly. Our intelligence shows they should be panicking by now. Instead, they seem to be waiting. Waiting for what? Admiral Kethvar asked. Unknown, my lord, but our scouts report that human ships are conducting regular patrols, almost as if this were a normal day. No emergency broadcasts, no frantic preparations, no attempts to call for reinforcements. Admiral Kethvar frowned. In his long career, he had seen many different reactions from enemies facing certain defeat. Some tried to flee. Others sent desperate messages begging for mercy. A few fought with the fury of the doomed. But he had never seen an enemy simply wait calmly for destruction. Perhaps they are in shock, suggested Commander Zalex from the third group. When faced with impossible odds, some species simply shut down mentally. But even as he said this, the Zephyrian officers felt uneasy. Their species had evolved from herd animals on the plains of their homeworld. They were used to facing threats, head-on, using their size and strength to overwhelm enemies. They understood fear, desperation, and fury. But this calm waiting was something outside their experience. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Sarah Chen reviewed the latest intelligence reports with her officers. The Zephyrian fleet was moving exactly as predicted, splitting into 3 groups to surround the human forces. "They're doing everything by the book," observed Lieutenant Commander Jackson, her tactical officer. "Classic pincer movement, textbook formation flying, standard Zephyrian battle doctrine." Captain Chen nodded. "That's exactly what we were counting on. Humans have been studying Zephyrian military history for months. They're predictable because they've never needed to be anything else. When you have overwhelming force, you don't need to be creative." She brought up a holographic display showing not just the immediate battle area, but the entire Zephyrian Empire. Red dots marked their military bases, supply depots, communication relays, and mining operations across 17 different star systems. "The problem with being an empire," she continued, "is that you have a lot to defend. And the problem with concentrating all your ships in one place is that you leave everything else unguarded." Her communications officer looked up from his console. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship. Admiral Kethvar wants to speak with you." "Put it through." The massive form of Admiral Kethvar appeared on the main screen. His 4 arms were crossed, and his yellow eyes blazed with confidence. Behind him, Captain Chen could see the bridge of a ship larger than most human space stations. "Human," the Admiral said, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through countless victories. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. You are surrounded by 300 of our most powerful warships. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy your entire fleet 10 times over. I offer you this one. Chance to surrender. Order your ships to power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded." Captain Chen stood and faced the screen. Next to the towering alien warrior, she looked impossibly small and fragile, but her voice was steady as she replied. "Admiral Kethvar, I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Thank you for your generous offer, but we must decline. We came here to mine this world, and we intend to continue our work." The Admiral's eyes widened slightly. He had expected begging, threats, or at least some sign of fear. Instead, this tiny human spoke to him as if they were equals discussing a minor business disagreement. "You do not understand," he said, his voice growing harder. "This is not a negotiation. In 1 hour my ships will open fire. Your vessels will be destroyed, and your people will die. This is certain. Mathematics cannot lie." Captain Chen tilted her head slightly. "Admiral, you're absolutely right about the mathematics. Your ships are bigger, your weapons are more powerful, and you have far more of them. In a straight fight, we would lose badly. Then why do you not surrender?" "Because we're not planning to fight you the way you expect to be fought." Admiral Kethvar felt a chill run down his spine, though he could not say why. "Explain." But Captain Chen shook her head. "I think you'll figure it out soon enough. Good luck, Admiral. You're going to need it." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kethvar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers exchanged worried glances. "My lord," his tactical officer said carefully, "should we begin the attack ahead of schedule?" The Admiral considered this. Every instinct told him that something was wrong, but he could not identify what it might be. His fleet was in perfect position. The enemy was outnumbered 6-1. All tactical advantages were on his side. "No," he decided. "We stick to the plan. In 57 minutes, all ships will fire simultaneously. The human fleet will be destroyed in the opening salvo." But as the minutes ticked by, Admiral Kethvar found himself pacing the bridge of his flagship. The human captain's words echoed in his mind. "We're not planning to fight you the way you expect to be fought." What did that mean? What could it possibly mean when faced with such overwhelming odds? On dozens of human ships scattered around Kepler 442b, crews made final preparations for what would either be humanity's greatest victory or its most spectacular defeat. Unlike the Zephyrians, the human crews were not tense or worried. Instead, they worked with the calm efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Captain Chen's plan was elegant in its simplicity, though it would have seemed like madness to any traditional military strategist. Instead of trying to match Zephyrian strength with strength, the humans would do what humans had always done best: adapt, improvise, and turn their enemies' advantages against them. All ships, this is defiance, Captain Chen broadcast on a secure channel. Final equipment check. Communications blackout begins in 10 minutes. After that, you all know what to do. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their fleet. We're not trying to conquer their empire. We're just trying to make them regret ever calling us fleas. She paused, then added with a slight smile in her voice, "After all, fleas don't attack the dog directly. They just make life so uncomfortable that eventually, the dog gives up and runs away." Chen out. In the Zephyrian fleet, Admiral Kethvar watched his chronometer count down the final minutes. Soon, this strange little war would be over, and he could add another victory to his long record of conquests. He had no idea that the battle was already lost. Admiral Kethvar watched his chronometer reach 0. "All ships," he commanded, "open fire." 300 Zephyrian dreadnoughts unleashed their plasma cannons simultaneously. The space around Kepler 442b lit up like a newborn star as thousands of energy beams converged on the human fleet. When the light faded, Admiral Kethvar expected to see nothing but expanding clouds of debris. Instead, he saw empty space. "Where are they?" he roared. His tactical officer frantically worked at his console. "Sir, the human ships, they're gone, all of them. Our sensors show no wreckage, no energy signatures, nothing." "Ships do not simply vanish," the admiral shouted. "Find them." But even as he spoke, reports began flooding in from across the Zephyrian Empire. A human ship had attacked a supply depot in the Altair system. Another had destroyed a communication relay near Vega. A third had disabled mining equipment on Proxima. Centauri B General Vextar's voice crackled over the communication system. "My lord, we're receiving reports of human attacks in 17 different systems. They're hitting our infrastructure, not our military targets." Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Red warning icons appeared across the map of Zephyrian space. Supply lines were being cut. Communication networks were failing. Mining operations were shutting down. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We saw their entire fleet, 50 ships at most. They cannot be in 17 places at once." But they were. While the Zephyrians had been focused on their grand battle plan, the humans had quietly scattered their forces across known space. Every human ship was small enough to avoid detection by standard sensors, fast enough to strike and disappear before help could arrive, and equipped with detailed intelligence about Zephyrian operations. Captain Chen, now commanding a strike on a supply convoy near Wolf 359, smiled as she watched Zephyrian cargo ships scatter in panic. The human plan was working exactly as intended. "This is Red Team," she reported to her scattered fleet. "Supply convoy destroyed. Moving to secondary target." Similar reports came from human ships across the galaxy. Blue Team had taken out a fuel depot. Green Team had disabled 3 communication satellites. Yellow Team had destroyed an entire shipyard. None of the individual attacks was decisive, but together, they created chaos throughout the Zephyrian Empire. More importantly, they forced Admiral Kethvar to make an impossible choice: keep his fleet together and watch his empire crumble or split. His forces to defend everything and lose his overwhelming advantage. The admiral chose to split his forces. "All ships, new orders," he commanded. "First group will pursue the humans attacking our supply lines in sectors 7 through 12. Second group will defend our communication networks in sectors 1 through 6. Third group will protect our mining operations in sectors 13 through 17. It was exactly what Captain Chen had hoped he would do. With the Zephyrian fleet scattered across dozens of star systems, the humans could pick their battles. When 100 Zephyrian ships arrived to protect a mining operation, they found nothing but empty space and destroyed equipment. When another group rushed to defend a communication relay, they discovered it had been rebuilt by human engineers and was now broadcasting propaganda to Zephyrian civilians. Weeks passed, and Admiral Kethvar found himself fighting a war unlike any he had ever experienced. There were no grand battles, no decisive victories, no enemy to defeat in single combat. Instead, there were only endless reports of minor attacks, infrastructure failures, and supply shortages. "My lord," General Vextar reported during one of their increasingly frequent emergency meetings, "our forces are stretched too thin. Every time we respond to an attack, the humans have already moved to a new target. It's like trying to catch smoke with our bare hands." Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical display, but it told him nothing useful. Human ships appeared and disappeared, like ghosts. They never stayed to fight when Zephyrian forces arrived. They never attacked targets that were heavily defended. They simply struck wherever they were not expected, caused as much damage as possible, and vanished again. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a message from the Zephyrian High Command. The Senate is demanding answers about the failed campaign." The Admiral felt his stomach sink. The Zephyrian Senate had given him 300 ships and orders to crush the human rebellion quickly and decisively. Instead, he had been fighting for a month with nothing to show for it but damaged infrastructure and frustrated commanders. "What do they want?" he asked. "They want to know when you will deliver victory, my lord. Food shipments are delayed because transport ships fear human attacks. Communication with outer colonies is sporadic because the humans keep destroying our relay stations. Mining operations are operating at 60% capacity because workers are afraid to leave the safety of their bases." Admiral Kethvar realized, with growing horror, that the humans were not trying to defeat the Zephyrian Empire militarily. They were trying to make the cost of the war so high that the Empire would choose to end it rather than continue fighting. And it was working. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Chen reviewed the latest reports from her scattered fleet. Human losses had been minimal. They had destroyed or damaged hundreds of Zephyrian installations. Most importantly, they had forced the mighty Zephyrian fleet to chase them across the galaxy like frustrated predators pursuing prey that refused to be caught. "Captain," her intelligence officer reported, "we're intercepting increased chatter between Zephyrian commanders. They're arguing about strategy. Some want to continue the hunt. Others want to pull back and defend only the most important targets. A few are suggesting they negotiate." Captain Chen nodded. "Phase 1 is complete. They're frustrated, divided, and no longer thinking clearly. Time for Phase 2. She opened a secure channel to all human ships. "All teams, this is Defiance. Excellent work so far. But now we need to give them a reason to really panic. I'm transmitting coordinates for your next targets. These strikes will convince them that nowhere in their empire is safe from the human Flea." Across the galaxy, human ships received their new orders and began moving toward targets that would shake the Zephyrian Empire to its core. The war was about to take a turn that Admiral Kethvar could never have imagined. On his flagship, the Admiral stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there in the darkness, tiny human ships were preparing their next attack. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethvar was beginning to understand what it felt like to be hunted, and he did not like it at all. Admiral Kethvar was reviewing damage reports when the emergency alarm began blaring throughout his flagship. The sound sent ice through his veins because he recognized it immediately. It was the alarm reserved for attacks on the Zephyrian home system. "Report," he shouted as he ran to the command center. His communications officer was pale with shock. "My lord, we're receiving distress signals from the home system. Multiple human ships have appeared near Zephyr Prime. They're attacking the orbital defense platforms." Admiral Kethvar felt the deck seem to tilt under his feet. The home system was the most heavily defended location in the entire Zephyrian Empire. It was protected by massive space stations, automated weapon platforms, and a permanent fleet of 50 dreadnoughts. The humans could not possibly have enough ships to threaten it. "How many human vessels?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. The reports are confused. Some say 3 ships, others say 30. The sensor readings are strange. On the main display, Admiral Kethavar watched feeds from the home system. Human ships darted between the orbital defense platforms like insects, too small and fast for the massive weapons to track. Explosions bloomed across the screen as critical systems were destroyed with surgical precision. "They're not trying to conquer the planet," General Vextar observed from his own ship. "They're targeting our command and control systems, communications, navigation, power distribution." Admiral Kethavar realized the terrible truth. The humans were not launching a massive invasion of the home system. They were creating the illusion of one. And every Zephyrian commander would react the same way he was about to react. "All ships," he commanded, "return to the home system immediately. Maximum speed." Across 17 star systems, Zephyrian commanders received the same order. The scattered fleet that had been hunting human raiders began converging on Zephyr Prime, abandoning their patrols and leaving human-occupied worlds completely undefended. Captain Chen watched this massive movement of enemy ships from her command post on a captured Zephyrian space station. The humans had taken the facility 3 days earlier and were now using its own sensors to spy on Zephyrian fleet movements. "It's working perfectly," she told her staff. "The Zephyrians are pulling back to defend their home system against an attack that doesn't exist." The human fleet threatening Zephyr Prime consisted of exactly 7 ships, using advanced holographic projectors and sensor jammers to create the appearance of a much larger force. They were performing the most dangerous part of the entire operation, knowing that if they were discovered, the illusion would collapse. But the Zephyrians were not thinking clearly enough to investigate carefully. They saw human ships attacking their most sacred world and reacted with pure emotion rather than tactical analysis. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, leading the deception team near Zephyr Prime, carefully monitored Zephyrian communications. "They're pulling ships from everywhere," she reported to Captain Chen. "The Admiral has ordered a complete withdrawal from occupied systems. They're abandoning positions they've held for decades." Captain Chen smiled grimly. "Then it's time for Phase 3. All teams begin liberation operations. Every world the eye. Zephyrians have left undefended is now free for the taking." What followed was the most extraordinary military campaign in galactic history. As Zephyrian forces raced to defend their home system from a phantom invasion, human teams swept through abandoned outposts, liberated occupied colonies, and captured vast amounts of advanced alien technology. On Kepler 442b, where the war had begun, human engineers worked frantically to extract as much valuable material as possible before the Zephyrians realized their mistake. On a dozen other worlds, human scientists studied captured Zephyrian computers, weapons, and starships. Admiral Kethavar arrived at Zephyr Prime with nearly 200 ships, expecting to find a massive battle in progress. Instead, he found 7 small human vessels fleeing into deep space and a handful of damaged orbital platforms. "This is impossible," he said, staring at the tactical display. 7 ships could not have caused this much damage. His chief engineer brought up detailed scans of the destroyed platforms. "My lord, look at these blast patterns. Each explosion was precisely targeted to cause maximum system failure, with minimum structural damage. This was not random destruction. This was surgical dismantling performed by people who understood our technology better than we do ourselves." The horrible truth began to dawn on Admiral Kethavar. The humans had not been trying to conquer Zephyr Prime. They had been studying it. Every attack, every damaged system, every carefully placed explosive had been gathering intelligence about Zephyrian technology and tactics. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving reports from across the Empire. Human forces have occupied 17 systems that we abandoned during our withdrawal. They've captured 4 major shipyards, 12 research facilities, and an entire fleet of cargo vessels." Admiral Kethavar sank into his command chair. In his eagerness to defend the home system, he had given the humans exactly what they wanted: access to Zephyrian technology and control over strategic locations throughout the galaxy. "Recall all ships," he ordered wearily. "We need to retake those systems before the humans can fortify them." But even as he gave the order, Admiral Kethavar knew it was too late. The humans had achieved in 1 month what should have taken years of conventional warfare. They had not defeated the Zephyrian Empire through superior force. They had tricked it into defeating itself. On the bridge of the Defiance, now orbiting a liberated human colony, Captain Chen received a priority message from Earth Command. She read it quickly, then smiled and turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to Admiral Kethvar," she said. "I think it's time we had another conversation." Minutes later, the Admiral's image appeared on her screen. The proud warrior who had called humans fleas looked exhausted and defeated. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides, and his yellow eyes had lost their fierce glow. "Captain Chen," he said formally. "I assume you are calling to offer terms for our surrender." Captain Chen shook her head. "Actually, Admiral, I'm calling to offer you terms for peace. There's a difference." Admiral Kethvar straightened slightly. "I do not understand." "We never wanted to conquer your empire," Captain Chen explained. "We just wanted you to leave us alone. You called us fleas, and you were right. But you forgot something important about fleas. They don't want to kill the host. They just want the host to stop trying to swat them." She leaned forward slightly. "Here's what we're prepared to offer. We'll return all captured Zephyrian personnel unharmed. We'll withdraw from all systems that were yours before this war began. In exchange, you recognize our right to exist as an independent species and establish normal trade relations with us." Admiral Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. "And if we refuse?" Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but her voice carried a note of steel. "Then we continue being fleas, Admiral. And trust me, you haven't seen anything yet." The Admiral looked at this small human female who had just outmaneuvered the greatest military force in the galaxy, using nothing but cleverness and determination. For the first time in his long career, he was facing an enemy he could not defeat through strength alone. "I will need to consult with the Senate," he said finally. "Of course," Captain Chen replied. "Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready to talk." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kethvar alone with his thoughts and the growing realization that the age of Zephyrian dominance might be coming to an end. The Zephyrian Senate had been in emergency session for 3 days. Admiral Kethvar stood in the center of the great chamber, surrounded by hundreds of senators from across the empire. Their voices rose and fell like ocean waves as they debated the human peace offer. "This is surrender," shouted Senator Mactel from the military faction. "We cannot accept terms from creatures we could crush under our feet." "What crushing?" Senator Yillara fired back from the economic faction. "For 2 months these humans have run circles around our fleet. Our supply lines are in ruins, our colonies are in revolt, and our treasury is empty from funding this disaster." Admiral B. Kethvar listened to the arguments with growing weariness. He had spent the past week trying to explain to the Senate how 50 small human ships had defeated 300 Zephyrian dreadnoughts, but most of the senators still refused to believe it was possible. Senator Colvis, the eldest member of the chamber, raised his staff for silence. "Admiral," he said in his crackling voice, "tell us again how these humans fight. Perhaps if we understand their methods, we can counter them." Admiral Kethvar activated the holographic display above the chamber. It showed the pattern of human attacks over the past 2 months. "Honored senators, the humans do not fight like any enemy we have faced before. They do not seek to conquer territory or destroy our fleets. Instead, they make war too expensive for us to continue." He pointed to various locations on the display. Here they destroyed a supply depot that fed 12 star systems. Here they captured a communication hub that coordinated defense for an entire sector. Here they disabled mining equipment that produces half our refined metals. "But these are small targets," protested Senator Mactel. "Any one of our dreadnoughts could protect them." "Yes," Admiral Kethvar agreed. "But we have thousands of such targets across the Empire. We cannot protect them all, and the humans know this." He changed the display to show Zephyrian fleet movements during the war. "They forced us to scatter our forces by attacking everywhere at once. When we concentrated our ships to defend important targets, they simply attacked different targets. When we spread out to cover everything, they defeated our smaller groups one by one." Senator Yillara nodded slowly. "Like water flowing around a stone. No matter how we positioned ourselves, they found a way through." "Exactly," the Admiral confirmed. And their final stroke was brilliant. By threatening our home system, they tricked us into abandoning our strategic positions. While we rushed to defend Zephyr Prime from 7 small ships, they captured 17 systems and enough of our technology to build their own fleet. The chamber fell silent as the senators absorbed this information. Finally, Senator Colvis spoke again. "What are your recommendations, Admiral?" Admiral Kethvar took a deep breath. This moment would define not just his career, but possibly the future of the Zephyrian Empire. "Honored senators, I recommend we accept the human peace offer." The chamber erupted in shouting. Some senators called him a coward. Others accused him of treason. But Admiral Kethvar continued speaking. "The humans have shown us something we refuse to believe, that superior numbers and firepower do not guarantee victory. They have proven that intelligence, adaptability, and understanding your enemy are more important than the size of your ships." He gestured to the tactical display still floating above them. "Look at what they accomplished. In 2 months they went from a small mining operation to controlling strategic positions throughout our empire. They did this not by destroying our fleet, but by making us destroy ourselves through our own reactions." Senator Mactel stood angrily. "Are you saying these tiny humans are superior to the Zephyrian Empire?" "I am saying they are different," Admiral Kethvar replied. "We evolved as herd animals. We understand strength in numbers, overwhelming force, direct confrontation. The humans evolved as hunters. They understand patience, strategy, using an enemy's strength against them." He paused, then continued more quietly. "And I am saying that if we continue this war, we will lose, not because they can destroy our fleets, but because they can make ruling an empire so expensive and difficult that our own people will demand we stop." The debate continued for hours, but eventually, the economic reality became clear. The war was costing more than the empire could afford. Sectors were declaring independence. Trade was collapsing. The Zephyrian military, spread thin across the galaxy chasing human raiders, was unable to maintain order. Finally, Senator Colvis called for a vote. By a narrow margin, the Senate voted to accept the human peace terms. 3 days later, Admiral Kethvar found himself on a neutral space station, sitting across a table from Captain Sarah Chen. The small human looked even more insignificant in person than she had on the communication screens. Yet this tiny creature had just defeated the greatest military power in the galaxy. "Admiral," she said politely, "thank you for agreeing to these negotiations." "Captain Chen," he replied formally, "I must ask, was this all planned from the beginning? Did you know we would react exactly as we did?" Captain Chen smiled slightly. "Admiral, humans have been studying your species for over a year. We read your military history, analyzed your tactics, even intercepted some of your training manuals. You're not unpredictable. You do what has worked for you in the past." She leaned forward. "The key insight was realizing that you see war as a contest of strength. You expect your enemies to either submit to superior force or fight desperately against impossible odds. You weren't prepared for an enemy that would simply refuse to play by your rules." Admiral Kethvar nodded slowly. "And the name you gave yourselves, the human fleas?" "Actually, that was your idea," Captain Chen reminded him with a slight smile. "You called us fleas, remember? We just decided to make it work for us." She stood and extended her small, soft hand. "Admiral, this doesn't have to be the end of Zephyrian power. It can be the beginning of a new kind of relationship between our species, one based on mutual respect rather than domination." Admiral Kethvar looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out with one of his 4 massive arms and gently shook it. The peace treaty was signed an hour later. Under its terms, humans would return all captured Zephyrian personnel and withdraw from systems that had belonged to the Empire before the war. In exchange, the Zephyrian Empire would recognize humanity as an independent species with the right to establish colonies and trade freely throughout the galaxy. As Admiral Kethvar prepared to leave the station, Captain Chen approached him one final time. "Admiral," she said, "there's something else you should know. Earth Command has asked me to extend an invitation to your military academy. We'd be honored to exchange officers and share tactical knowledge." Admiral Kethvar raised his yellow eyes in surprise. "You would teach us your methods?" "Why not?" Captain Chen replied. "The galaxy is a big place. There are plenty of challenges that would be easier to face together than apart. And who knows, maybe we can learn something from your approach too." Admiral Kethvar considered this unexpected offer. After a moment, he nodded. "I will present your invitation to the Senate." As the Zephyrian fleet departed for home, carrying news of peace throughout the Empire, Captain Chen stood on the observation deck of her ship and watched them go. Around her, human colonies were already beginning to rebuild and expand. The war had lasted only 2 months, but it had changed everything. Throughout the galaxy, other species were reassessing their understanding of power, warfare, and what it meant to be strong. The age when superior numbers and firepower guaranteed victory was ending. A new age was beginning. An age when intelligence, adaptability, and the willingness to think differently could triumph over any advantage. The human fleet had jumped into battle and emerged victorious. But more than that, they had shown the galaxy that sometimes the smallest creatures could achieve the greatest victories by refusing to fight on anyone's terms but their own. In the years that followed, the phrase human fleet would become part of galactic military doctrine. It would describe any force that defeated superior enemies not through direct confrontation, but by making the cost of victory too high to bear. And whenever young Zephyrian officers asked their instructors how such a thing was possible, they would be told the story of Admiral Kethvar and Captain Sarah Chen, and how 50 small ships had defeated 300 dreadnoughts by simply refusing to be the enemy their opponents expected them to be.